righty. Got another live for you today, folks. Starting a little bit late. I had to go get some CO2. But this will be a good test to see if more people show up at a later time. It is now 10:25. 10:25 in the AM on a Saturday. I like these little Saturday sessions. Get to hang out, just can. Get all stocked back up. Oh, yeah. Let's see, is this camera looking okay? See if my audio's okay once people get in here. Should be. Showed all the volume. The volume bars were showing up on the bottom, so hopefully it's all right for y'all to hear. Let me know if you cannot hear the audio. Let me know in the chat. But yeah, I am here getting some cans knocked out. I just got back in town from Las Vegas, Nevada, and am trying to catch up. So I was gone for about 4 days and luckily had a buddy running the tap room for me. So I'm coming back in here. All the cans sold out, so I got to restock. So I'll be doing this for a couple of hours today and getting ready for one final day of the week, which hopefully is a good sales day. Be nice. All right. So I briefly mentioned, I think before anybody was on here, but I started this a little bit later today because I had to go get CO2, but it's Saturday. So the place I normally get CO2 was closed, and so I had to drive all the way across town and go exchange a tank out there. But we're good. We're up and rolling. It's a little bit later than I would have liked to start, so I'll be pushing up against the opening time more than I'd like, but it'll be all right. Should be good. Just thinking a little bit about what I could talk about in these lives too, while there's, no communication in the chat, or I'm just sitting here canning, so that's kind of boring. But last time I did some updates on what's going on in the brewery, and the only thing that's changed since last week is that I was out of town for 2 of the days. So I had a buddy of mine, Eric Kukla, shout out to Kukla. He's the man. He saved me. So I went out of town for my girlfriend's 40th birthday, and he watched the bar for me for a couple of days. And the sales were, they were okay, better than they could have been. But one trend that I've noticed in the past when I do go out of town is that I generally I'll leave town, and then I tell all the customers I'm just a one-man show. So people usually will see me the week before, and I'll be like, oh, I'm heading out of town. I won't be here next week. And what happens is it's usually really slow the next week. So I tried my best to not mention anything, because, a lot of people come in, they like to talk and hang out. So I tried my best not to mention it to too many people, but hopefully that helped out. And we had some regulars and some newbies come in, but you never know week to week. So inconsistent. Sales are so inconsistent here. People ask me all the time. The number one question I get is, when are you busiest? Does it ever get busy in here? Because usually it's when people come in and there's one person at the bar. But I never have a good answer, because it's so hit or miss. Sometimes Thursdays are busy. Sometimes, Saturdays at 1 p.m. right when I open are busy. Sometimes it's Friday at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. right as I'm closing. So it's just the nature of a smaller town. Kind of the ebbs and flows of business are pretty unpredictable. But, you live and you learn, and you try to figure it out. prepare for it. That's why these canning days are so tricky, because I usually do the majority of my canning on, Thursday before I open up for the week so that I can get a good base. But I could go the entire day on Thursday and sell like 1 6-pack, and then Friday in the first couple of hours, it's just a run on 6-packs and then I'm out. So that's kind of annoying. Never know. Do you get a fair amount of regulars? I do get a fair amount of regulars. So I would say most of my business is from regulars recently, but historically, most of my business is from regulars, but I've gotten a lot of new customers in recently, which is great. It's amazing. Like that's how you that's how you grow a better business, to get new customers in. But I had an article come out in a couple of publications. So one of my friends has been in the industry for a while, and she does beer writing. And so she wrote an article in this magazine called Texas Highways. They got, it's a pretty big publication here, and it got pushed out to a lot of people. So I've had quite a few folks that have come in from reading that article. And then she also posted an article in the Washington Post, which mentioned Tanglefoot. So that was pretty cool. So I've had a couple of publications in the last few months that have gotten the name out. But usually in a small town setting like this, it's mostly word of mouth. So I just kind of hope that I do a good job and people like the beer and tell their friends about it. But one thing that I do need to do a better job of is just marketing altogether. I need to start getting the word out, but more importantly, like getting people to check in and leave reviews and like share their location when they come in here, because for the average person, I think that it's easy to overlook those things and say, oh yeah, I'll leave a review, or I'll check in sometime or next time. But it's so impactful. So if y'all go to breweries and y'all want to help out, like people always ask, oh, how can I help out? Like leave a 5-star review, leave some kind words, and check into the establishment on social media, post about it, because every person that sees it from their post, it's just, it's a much larger reach than just posting to the same audience all the time on your own Facebook. Hey, Andy, finally get to join in. What's up, Alonzo? Thanks for joining, man. Just doing a little canning day. I also have a ton of emails that I have not responded to from being gone for the few days. So I'm also super behind on that, but probably nothing extremely important, because, well, all I do is make beer and sell it. So people aren't ordering it online. So it's mostly just waiting on folks to come in here. So it can't be too pressing. What else is going on? Oh man, I totally lost my train of thought. I had something else I was going to say, but when I was in Vegas, I guess I can touch on some of the beer things that I did. So I didn't go to any breweries, which was kind of a bummer, but we had a very, very busy schedule when I was out there. But we did go to, I guess I went to one brewery. We went to Brewdog. They have a giant location on the Strip in Vegas. And we went in there and the beers were great. We had a good time, but the view up there was awesome. So we went to this giant rooftop brewery in Las Vegas and paid, like $15 a beer or something. Everything is so expensive in Vegas. If anybody hasn't been to Vegas, just be prepared. Bring a lot of money, because everything is expensive. But that was kind of cool. Then everything else was pretty much just drinking light beers, drank a bunch of Heinekens, some Dos Equis, and didn't have too many craft beers, unfortunately. Curious what the employment is like in that area when you're break even to start hiring part-time serving staff to help you out. Oh, when's your break even? Sorry, I'm bad at reading. So the employment options out here, like, first of all, that's a good question, because it's pretty complex. But if I were to get to a place where I would be able to hire somebody and afford to pay them in lieu of me like working on something else that would be more, value for the time that I'm putting in rather than just bartending, the employment opportunities would be pretty challenging out here, especially for what I am doing. So one of the things that I always considered when I started this place was that I wanted to, if I hired somebody or if I had somebody watch the bar, I always wanted them to be very like knowledgeable about the beer, knowledgeable about the way to pour the beer, and be, you know, passionate about it. So I'm super fortunate. This past week when I was gone, I mentioned my buddy Eric Kukla. He actually works up at Balcones, but he watched the bar, but he is super into beer. He used to work out at Jester King for a long time, and so he's very knowledgeable about beer and beer service and these beers in particular. So it's always good to have people that are like very interested in the product that you're selling, because frankly, that's all I do is I sell one product, is Czech lagers. So if you're not super interested in that, and it's just like a, you know, part-time bartending gig, I have never really been interested in that. But the short answer is that the hiring opportunities out here, it's a little bit more challenging. You know, the wages out here are much lower compared to Austin, but it's also, you know, the talent pool for people that are like super passionate about beer is smaller. But I haven't even gotten to that point to where I'm able to hire anybody where it would be break even. So I haven't done too much research into what it would actually look like. So I don't have a firm answer. I'm just rambling, making up answers. Sorry. As a novice home brewer, which of your recipes is good to start out? 10, 12? Well, as a novice home brewer, neither of them are hard to brew, but if you have the equipment, specifically if you have temperature control, then you're good to go with any of the beers. The recipes are very simple. The 10 degree is the simplest, I would say, just because it's Pils malt. It's a touch of honey malt, but it's not necessary. And just a small amount of hops for bitterness only. So that's the simplest recipe. But if you don't have adequate temperature control and, you know, access to good lager yeast and the ingredients that are used in it, then it doesn't matter which beer you pick. If you don't have access to those things, it won't turn out like this beer. But if you want to produce this beer exactly like it's made here, use, you know, the Czech lager strain that I mentioned in the videos when I detail the recipes. Use Weirmann Pils or comparable Pils, and use Czech Saaz hops, and then let it ferment at 50 degrees and let it age for at least, you know, 4 to 6 weeks. Let it lager. So if you do those things and you pitch enough yeast and you clean and sanitize appropriately, you'll get good beers. And again, these aren't like complicated beers to make. The recipes are super simple, but yeah, it's all in the details. It's all about like letting it sit for a while, letting it clean up real good. But that's it. The 12 is my favorite though. So if you were to pick between the two, and it just came down to preference, I prefer the 12 because it's more robust in flavor. It's got more hop character, more malt character, and it's just a more well-rounded beer in my opinion. Man, I am thirsty. Not only did I get dehydrated from the amount of alcohol I consumed, but it was so dry out there that my nose got chapped, my lips got chapped. It was great though. I love that cool, crisp Las Vegas air. Now back to the Texas humidity, and it's like 47 degrees today. It was something like 85 when I left. So Texas's weather is very bipolar. Never know what you're going to get. Oh yeah, also I'm running out of labels. Totally forgot about that. One of the downsides of being, I keep saying like the downsides of being small, it's all relative. Like you have different challenges the bigger you get, but ordering small batches of stuff is a huge pain because one, you get the highest cost per label or whatever you're ordering in small quantities, but two, you run through them, a small batch quicker. So you have to order more frequently, and the way that shipping charges have gotten, everything is like twice as expensive as it used to be. Specifically, like grain costs are a full third of what they were before the pandemic, more expensive, and then the shipping costs on top of that. So like every time I order, like I never order a full pallet of grain because I don't move through it that quickly. But when I do, the shipping alone is like $200. So that's always fun. Long story short, I need to order 10-degree pale lager labels. How much of running a brewery is a good location? Would you still open a brewery in a location with higher saturation of breweries? Or would you choose a location where there is not much competition? That's a great question. And I can only speak from my experience and what I've seen in the industry. But the short answer is yes, the location is very important nowadays. And I'll expand on that in a second. But the second answer to the second part of the question is, would you open a brewery in a less saturated area? Well, I did. And there are a lot of downside. There are a lot of pros to that. One, it's cheaper, it's easier, and the barrier to entry is lower, and you get to be kind of like one of the first movers. The downside, though, is that the population of a smaller area or an undersaturated market is going to be smaller, generally speaking. And there are fewer and fewer like unsaturated or like underserved markets. And if there was the demand for it, there's a good likelihood that somebody would open it. And now maybe there's a unique scenario where there is a gap in the market and you could be the first one to fill that gap. That would be amazing. You could have like the first mover advantage. But generally speaking, I thought for a long time that going somewhere rural, sorry, I have trouble saying that word, would be a huge benefit, like especially in a state as big as Texas. You can go somewhere rural that has a decent population, but you could be the only brewery there. Well, when I opened Tanglefoot, that was like, it wasn't the case because there was already a brewery here, but I was like, I'll be one of the only breweries in this area. And then I opened up about a year after the first like craft brewery in Temple opened, the second brewery. And then within 2 years, there were 5 breweries in Temple. And so it's just nowadays, like breweries open so quickly that it's really hard to get that kind of first mover's advantage. But then expanding on the first part about the location, nowadays the brewery model that the brewery model that in my opinion, I think is the most has the most potential for success is the taproom model, the brew pub model, where you have good beer, you have food, you have wine, you have liquor, you have entertainment, trivia, all that stuff. Basically, you're a big fancy bar that makes its own beer, and location is uber important for that model. So you're looking at getting a probably pretty expensive piece of real estate, whether you're buying or renting. If you're renting, that's a whole nother discussion. But location has become way more important than it used to be. For those of you that have been into craft beer for a while, remember the early 2010s where we would all just go to like a warehouse, and here in Texas, it'd be like 100 degrees outside. You'd sit on a sticky picnic table and get a decent beer and a shaker pint, and you'd be happy. That'd be your brewery experience. And now that is not necessarily the case. Hi, Andy. Greetings from Brazil. What's up? Greetings from Texas. Hope I could visit your brew pub one day. Love Czech lagers. Long living for Tanglefoot. Thank you. I appreciate that. That would be cool if you could make it in. I'd also love to go to Brazil. That would be awesome. Are there any breweries around you that make Czech lagers or specialize in lagers? Let me know. Always interesting to see where other concepts that are similar to this lager focus are popping up at. All right, this will be my last sixer of the 12. And then I'll get these labeled up. Yeah, here in Texas, when I opened, there was I was just talking about this a second ago with Glenn's question, but when I opened up, I was like, I want to do this very particular beer experience, serve these very specific beers, serve them in the right glass with the taps in the bar that I built out. So the right vibes and ambiance in the specific location that's very Czech heavy and has a lot of heritage that would hopefully align with the beer and the mission of the business. But so I opened, and there was already another brewery in the state that kind of focused on Czech beers, but they were less about the beer experience and the pour, and they did some other stuff that wasn't like just Czech pills and dark lager. So I was like, okay, well, I'll be this first kind of brewery that specifically focuses on this. And then within a year of me opening, there was a brewery, hotel, restaurant called Pivovar in Waco, which is about 40 minutes north of here, that opened up, and they are a specifically very authentically Czech, brewery, hotel, restaurant. So, and then since then, there have been, like, since I opened, the proliferation of these Lucre taps has been crazy. Like, so many breweries have these taps now. So that's just goes to show that, like, you can have this very specific, particular niche idea and try to execute it really well. But, everybody has ideas, and a lot of people will, try to execute that as well. So you may not have as big of an advantage as you thought you did initially. And especially in starting up a business like this, it can take a couple of years. So an idea that was really good in 2017 may not be as good in 2019 when you actually open. So it's hard to say. The concepts, though, are that, I'll be curious to see what brewery concepts look like in about 5 years, because things move so quickly in this industry. All right, come on. Let's see if I can get this. Got to move on to labeling. Homebrewer here. What's up, homebrewer? Just got my canning machine. What PSI is your regulator set to when purging the cans and keg pressure? Any tips for a noob to canning beers? Good question. Yes. The kegs are always set at around 13 to 14 PSI on this kegerator. And it's hard to give blanket answers on things like that because, and I did a video about CO2 and how it works in beer. But it's all relative to the temperature and the headspace and all this stuff, and your draft lines, the restrictions in the line. So a blanket answer for keg pressure is probably not going to help super well, but mine is at about 14 PSI for this setup. And then the pressure of the purge is around 4 to 5 PSI. But really, I just use I've used lower and higher pressures before, but it's mostly about figuring out how, like, the flow rate, basically. Like, pressure can be 100 PSI, but if your flow rate is nothing, it's irrelevant. So just making sure that when you're purging, you can feel CO2 gas kind of like flowing over the top. And then I just do it for like 5 seconds so that I make sure that I have a good purge in the can. But yeah, about 4 to 5 PSI should be fine. As long as you let it go for the appropriate amount of time, you should be good. All right, let's get this 12 on here. And I had this question last time. Maybe you don't have this question, but I'll reiterate it. But I do just can off of my taps. So I hook up a beer gun with a beer nut to just the front of the Lucre taps. That's one of the benefits of these taps, is they just have the same threading as a beer nut. And so it's really simple for me to set up this canning setup once I get everything sanitized. But what I used to do in my old brewery that I worked at was I would connect, there were these flow control valves that you could connect to the shanks of the tap. So I would remove the tap and then connect this flow control valve that would be basically, well, it allowed you to control the flow, and you could control the foam of the beer coming out as well with that. So it allowed you to put it on the shank and be able to connect your beer gun to it. And then depending on how the beer poured out of your draft system, it made it much simpler to dial it in, because one of the things with draft systems is they're all unique, and beer pours at different rates and different levels of pressure. So the CO2 will either stay in solution or come out of solution more or less. And so it can be really tricky pouring beer or canning beer off a draft system if you don't have enough restriction. So if your beer is, let's say it's relatively high carbonation at like 2.8 volumes of CO2, and you want to fill cans, but you don't have enough restriction in the line, then you're just going to be pouring a ton of foam. So getting a little flow control, and these taps have a little flow control valve on them. So that works out nicely for this setup, but just be aware of that when you are canning, you're going to have some loss, and it's going to be, especially on like a 5-gallon system, a homebrew scale, that's a real bummer. If you're like pouring a bunch of foam down the drain on a bigger system, it becomes less and less of a problem because it's economies of scale. But yeah, on a homebrew setup, canning off of a 5-gallon keg, I would be very, very aware of how much foam you're getting from the pour. All right. Let's see. Got a good little crew in here. Got 8 folks watching. Thanks for joining, everybody. For those that are joining and don't know what's going on, my name is Andy. I am the owner, operator, cleaner of Tanglefoot Brewing in Temple, Texas. And sometimes I do these lives when I'm canning because I just kind of put my head down and work, and I answer some questions and hopefully don't bore you too much. Or maybe that's the point of you watching, is you want to be bored and you want to go to sleep. But yeah, that's what I'm doing here. If you have any questions, drop them below. Right now, I'm just labeling the beers that I just canned up for those that want to see. This is my label machine, and I just turn it around like this. And that's hard to do with your when you're holding a camera up as well. So, but I do it for the viewers. I'm happy to make myself look like a fool for your entertainment. Ooh. Come on. It's hard to get that thing to stay stable. All right. And then, well, while I'm thinking about it, other canning tips, though, for AMC Graph X, be sure that you calibrate your canning machine. So the seams that are on these cans are super, super, they're very tight tolerances. They're very finicky. And if you don't seam them properly, they will leak. So what you're going to need to do that is a tool called a teardown tool. It basically pinches the seam, allows you to remove just the seam from the can, and then you can measure it with calipers so that you can ensure that each fold of the metal, because it's like 3 layers of metal squished together, that each fold is a specific distance or a specific length so that it's within spec. So if you don't have that, I don't know, I guess just go by manufacturer recommendation, but definitely necessary if you're going to be doing a lot of cans and you don't want them to leak, is to have good quality control on the seams. Rob, we appreciate you for that. Thanks, dude. Happy to oblige. Machu, I brewed your 12 degree a month ago. There's about a month of lagering left. I can't wait to see the results. Yeah, that's awesome. Pull a pint off. See what it tastes like right now. I like it young sometimes, the beer. But you will know, it'll be a good metric to have, like side by side, or not side by side, but knowing what it tasted like at 1 month versus 2 months. And the last stream I mentioned, like I've had some of these beers at 4 months and they were great. So yeah, just keep tasting it because it will change, gets cleaner, crisper, more balanced. Do you have any plans to add any more beers in the future, or are you pretty content with the ones you have on tap now? What are the pros and cons for having a lot on tap and limited selection? Good question. I will dive into this. The short answer is no, I don't plan on adding any more beers, although I do have 2 seasonal beers that I rotate throughout the year. So my winter seasonal that is currently on is the 22 degree Tamave, which is a 9% stout version of the 13 degree Tamave, which is a dark lager. That is the winter seasonal. And then I have a spring summer seasonal, which is a 14 degree amber lager. And that comes out on my anniversary party, which will be in May, most likely. Still haven't confirmed the date yet, but most likely in May. And so those are the beers that I have throughout the year. And the goal was to only brew 3 beers. I extended that to 4 for seasonal stuff because I had 4 taps. But basically wanted to focus on a small number of beers and execute them very well so that I could be, build a brand around, the guy that makes Czech lager. So if anybody ever was like, oh, I want to get a Czech lager, the first place I think of is Tanglefoot. So that was the goal behind that. But the pros and cons of having a small versus a large tap menu are pretty extensive. So the pros of having a small tap list is choice, selection. It's way easier for the customer. Customer comes in and you're like, hey, I've got 3 beers. Okay, well, I guess, do you want light or dark? And it's pretty simple. And they can drink all of the beers in one setting, at least these beers that are pretty low in ABV, and get to try them all, because people like trying all the things and seeing what they like and dislike. So that's really positive. And then it also makes it super easy on the brewing operations, because you don't have to think about new recipes. You don't have to think about new beer names, which I will do another video on that, because naming beers is a huge pain in the ass. You don't have to worry about buying a bunch of different ingredients. It makes it much simpler. But the cons kind of play into the pros of a large beer list. The cons of having a small beer list are the variety. I mean, obviously, but the variety for the customer. The customers generally nowadays want to try a bunch of different things. People love flights. I do not do flights. And so people like to come in and try things and rate things and do their whole, trying as many beers as they can on the app. But that is a downside. I'm going to put these in the cooler real quick, but I'm going to keep talking. The other downside of a small list is just make it kind of like pigeonholes you into, which was kind of the plan, pigeonholes you into just doing one thing. So people, if they are like, hey, I want to go somewhere with an IPA, and another person's like, oh, but I want wine, and somebody else is like, I love stouts, then you kind of appeal to a very niche group of people, and larger groups generally want more diversity. So the larger tap list is much more beneficial for the modern day craft brewery, because you got to have things to please everybody in the group. And then the other benefit of a large selection of beer, or at least this was a unique benefit to a place that serves their own beer and other people's beer on draft, is that we saw at the other brewery I ran, Black Star Co-op in Austin, we used to brew, when I started working there, we'd brew like 6 to 8 beers at any given time, just based on the production restrictions. And then we slowly started increasing the special releases and like individual, like we would do single kegs of beer. And when we started increasing the number of house beers from like 6 to 8 to like 12 to 14 to 15, we saw the percentage of beer sold skewed more heavily to house beer the more that we had on draft. And this makes sense, right? Like naturally you have X number of taps, 20 taps. If half of them are house beer and you increase that to 2/3, then you're going to have more people, just like statistics of people ordering random things. They're going to order more of that. But there was another factor that played into that, where it just appears like, or it doesn't appear, you just have more beer that you brew in house. And so people naturally gravitate to that because your beer menu is larger, it's more appealing. And then the stuff that you do have from other breweries is kind of like filling gaps that you can't brew. But yeah, larger beer menu, generally speaking, in a modern craft brewery is beneficial from the consumer perspective. But the downsides are also you have to brew all that beer. And then when you get to like 20 taps, all those individual beers don't move quicker. They just kind of sit. And so you have IPAs that stay for 6 months. But that got me thinking. I'd love to expand on that more in another video, because it is an interesting topic. Thanks for the canning tips, of course. When you're brewing your lagers at such a cold temp, do you perform a derest? If so, do you perform it at 75%, or what percentage of attenuation? Very good technical question. Yes. Yes, I perform a derest. So my fermentation process looks like this. So I try to knock out at 50 degrees. If I can't hit 50 degrees, I will allow the tank to cool. It's 50, but basically knock out at 50 degrees, pitch at 50 degrees, and then let fermentation go at 50 degrees until halfway through fermentation. That's a metric that we always used at the old brewery that I ran. And so the thought process is this: when you are initially pitching yeast and it goes through this exponential growth phase, and then the first steps of fermentation is when most of the esters are produced. So the reason you want to maintain lower temperatures in a lager, or even in the ale, you want to hit these very specific pitch temperatures, is to have control over the esters and phenols that are produced during the fermentation, right? So once you get past that part where most of those esters and phenols are produced, then raising the temperature has very little effect on the flavor. So after about 50% attenuation is when that's kind of the minimum, but sometimes it'll go to 75%, and sometimes it'll be pretty much finished out before I raise the temperature on the tank. But I'll raise it to 60 degrees Fahrenheit and then allow it to free rise up to 60 degrees and sit there until it passes a diacetyl test, which is usually a couple of days. But I think I've mentioned this several times before, but all of my beers sit in primary fermentation tank, the main fermentation vessel, for pretty much at least 2.5 to 3 weeks. So fermentation gets done within about a week and a half to 2 weeks, and then it just sits there for another few days to allow it to clean up. So I do perform a diacetyl rest, as you should, as everybody should, if you're brewing lagers, unless you want diacetyl in your beer. But yeah, super important. And then you can perform a diacetyl test on the beers. If you want to know how to do that, go watch my video, How to Get Butter Out of Beer. And I talk you through how to do it pretty simply. Just heat the beer sample up, hold it at 140 for about 15 minutes, and then smell and taste to your heart's content. Also, as far as diacetyl is concerned, I've never used this, but there's a can't remember if it's an enzyme or something, but basically ALDS, I think that's what it's called. Basically, it's a diacetyl reduction adjunct that you can put into beer. So it takes, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure it like either breaks down the precursor or something that allows the beer to clean up the diacetyl or not produce as much, so that you can cut a few days off of fermentation. I know a lot of breweries that use that. I've never personally used it and wasn't interested in using it here, mostly because everything takes so long anyways. Like, I'm going to lager these for, 4 to 6 weeks. What's a couple extra days at 60 degrees? So I'm not really trying to save every hour of tank time. So it wasn't really a priority, but you can do it the old fashioned way. And I say 60 degrees because that's just been my go-to. Just raise it 10 degrees from fermentation temperature. But there's no harm in raising it any further. Like, you can raise it to 70 degrees. It's going to be fine. It's not going to produce any more flavors. In fact, it'll just expedite the diacetyl uptake. So feel free to just pull your beer out and set it on the counter or wherever you put it, to let that diacetyl get out of there. Correct. It mitigates VDKs. There you go. That's the benefit of these things. I get to learn something too. VDKs, vicinal diketones. It's the precursor to diacetyl. And also a good test for kind of refining your palate. Perform diacetyl tests, but try to do diacetyl tests without performing the actual forced diacetyl test, where you just take a sample of the beer and try to pick it up, because it makes you really, really search for it. So take a sample off a tank, taste it, smell it. If you can pick up any trace amounts of diacetyl, you definitely know that it's no good, and it needs to sit there at a higher temperature for a few more days. But if you can't pick anything up, then go ahead and perform the forced diacetyl test. But I used to do that with IPAs a lot, because they were much more prone to hot, like ale fermentations are much more prone to like high peaks of diacetyl. They also clean it up really quickly, but you would notice that in a lot of IPAs. And if you ever had an IPA with diacetyl in it, it is like the worst. I hate it. It just kills all the hop flavor and just tastes like, buttery, whatever, citra hops. No good. Need that coffee. diacetyl test is interesting too, because I'm about to film a video where I'm going to brew some beer on a very, very low budget, just using stuff that I have around my house. And the diacetyl rest is going to be a fun one because I may end up doing exactly what I just alluded to. Like, I think I might just put my container of beer on the counter, let it warm up. I'm sure my girlfriend will love that. Where'd that thing go? All right. I'm canning the 10 degree now for anybody that's joining or still watching. I switched from the 12, knocked out about 5-6 packs of that. Now I'm doing the 10 degree, which most of these will be without labels because I am out of 10 degree pale lager labels and need to reorder them ASAP. Get a little nicotine action. I got 13 people in here. Was up to 15 a second ago. It's pretty good for a little Saturday sesh. Mm-hmm. Oh, I mentioned this last week, but I could go into a little bit more detail now. But I've got a pop-up event. My first pop-up event in Austin is this Sunday. We're going to be popping up at Diaz Market in Austin, Texas. If anybody is around, please come by, grab a beer. It's going to be a good time. My girlfriend's band, Over Gold Country Club, is going to be playing some tunes, and I'm going to have some special commemorative cups to serve the beer in. So that'll be fun. And this happens to be during South by Southwest, which started yesterday. Yeah, I think yesterday was the first day. So it's a madhouse. The airport was pretty nutty last night when we got in, but I always enjoy it during South by. The city just kind of comes alive. Everybody's out doing stuff. The east side gets really cool. A lot of free shows, a lot of free events. So we'll probably be out there hitting it up. And then I'll be pouring beer on that Wednesday from 5 to whenever I run out. So if anybody's around, please come on by. Good morning, Andy, and everyone in the chat. What's up, Blackwood Brews? Welcome. Mm-hmm. Yep. This is it. Hope you're enjoying this. Me passively working. I thought about doing some lives during service as well. I don't know if that is interesting to any of y'all, but if I can get the camera set up during a busier service, because it'd be pretty boring if it was just dead in here. It was just me sitting behind the counter. But if it got busy on a Friday night or something, maybe setting the camera up and pouring beers like Sally Slices. If anybody knows who that is. Because I enjoy watching beer being poured myself. So maybe you do too. Do you do a lot of events? How important do you think they are? I don't do a lot of events. They are very important, which is so bass-ackwards to say. But I'm happy to express my opinion about it. Events are very important, unfortunately. In this kind of modern brewery landscape, the name of the game is entertainment. So yeah, you're in the business of making beer, but you're mostly in the business of creating experiences for people. And that is usually heavy on the event side. So one of the things that objectively makes breweries more busy and popular is to have a consistent schedule of either new and interesting events or recurring events like trivia, bingo, all that stuff. And that is just not something that I personally want to do with my life. If you want to get real deep into it, I didn't want to open a event space. I didn't want to just plan parties and events and figure out ways to get people through the doors that don't really center around beer. Beer was always the goal. And if it doesn't work out and the business can't, survive on me focusing on this particular service model, that's okay. That's what I was passionate about. That's what I really wanted to bring to this area. But if it requires me like doing something that I am not in love with, and in fact brings me a lot of dissatisfaction, then I'm not interested in that. So unfortunately, it is kind of the downsides of the proliferation of so many breweries is, I've said that twice, by the way, proliferation in this stream. But that's kind of the downside, is that now that you're competing with it, not just breweries, but wineries, bars, other, venues that have music and stuff like that, you kind of have to have events and things that draw people in. But yeah, sorry, just rambling, getting these thoughts out of my head, but it definitely moves the needle, definitely keeps people coming back. Having something to entertain people while they're here is super important. It's just, if you have the real is like, if somebody came to you and said, hey, do you want to start a business that you're not super passionate about in a city that's an hour away from where you live, you probably not take that offer. And that's kind of the position that I'm in with this here, where as long as I can continue to do this very specific passion project, I'm happy with it. But yeah, if I have to pivot to do something that doesn't bring me the same amount of joy, then I'd rather do something that doesn't bring me joy, that is closer to home and most likely pays a lot more. So that's my 2 cents. I just got a duo filler. You should look into one. They're cheap. They'll do all the work for you, purges and fills it. Fills itself so you can label, do the next process. I'll check it out. I think I've checked it out before. Somebody else mentioned that on a stream. I'm not exactly sure if that's the one that has, I hope it's not the one that's like $5,000, because there's a $5,000 like can purger and filler, which, no offense to if anybody has one or if that company sees this, but it is totally not worth it. I would rather do the manual labor of filling the cans with a $100 setup than a $5,000 just filling setup, but that's most likely not what you're talking about if you're on a homebrew scale. But I've seen a few different options. There's one that I really was interested in modifying, and I've thought about making one myself, like just making it for this canning process. But is it called tap cooler? Basically, it's like a clamp situation that has a silicone gasket that seals on the top of the can and allows you to counter pressure fill, which is a way more efficient way of filling cans. The only downside is that it is also very labor intensive and very time consuming. So it's not quite as quick as this, because you have to mount the can, clamp it down, pressurize it, fill it, depressurize, unclamp, and then redo it. But I've thought about making a jig or something similar to that would allow me to basically have that attachment on the beer gun so that I could kind of like pull it off and on and just keep pressure with my hand. But have yet to do that. And there's all kinds of gizmos and gadgets out there. You can really go down the rabbit hole and spend a lot of money getting different various equipments. But I've always been a kind of a self-starter and DIY type person. So I usually work with like the least, the simplest mechanism that I can to get the job done, which is, on a small scale is fine, but on a larger production scale is definitely not the approach that is most ideal. So getting good equipment that is designed to do a job efficiently is way smarter. I just hate spending money and like doing stuff myself to my own detriment. So the life of a small business owner. What time is it? Oh, it's only 11:14. Nice. For some reason, it feels like it's much later. Drove around this morning trying to find CO2 because the shop that I normally get it from was closed. So that added an extra hour onto my day that I wasn't expecting, but no complaints. Also, while I'm canning, I get plenty of entertainment just by looking out the window. This parking lot is nuts. This space has been here for, this was my family's barbecue restaurant for like 54 years, but this area is kind of I don't know. Just a lot of cars move through here, but they kind of like tear through the parking lot. And I've seen several accidents at this intersection. And this building has big windows like right out front, so you can kind of see everything. So I get plenty of entertainment from just watching cars and weird things happen. A lot of drug deals have happened in this parking lot. Well, 50 minutes into it. Probably keep this rolling for another 10 minutes or so, and then try to wrap this up and get everything cleaned up and prepped for service. Oh, gotta get that kegerator set up too. I'm bringing this kegerator down for my event on Wednesday. So I'm going to demount these tap towers. I don't know if you can kind of see the top of it, but basically where the beer taps are connected to, they've got 4 little bolts that attach them to the kegerator. And instead of like just detaching all the lines and hoses and stuff, I can just unbolt that and then take the lines that are already fed up through these tap towers and mount them to the kegerator that I can bring down to Austin, so that it's not too much disassembly. But it'll be cool to finally have those Lucre taps out in Austin, Texas. All right. Let's get that right there. How much foot traffic do you have at your location? Or are most people just driving? Yeah, it's mostly driving. This this area is pretty well, Temple in general doesn't have a lot of like foot traffic. The city isn't huge, but it is pretty spread out. So like there's not a ton of people just walking on the street, especially over here. So I could probably count on my 2 hands the number of times that people have just been walking and stopped in. Most people around here will drive, and this is kind of a little out of the way of where most people live in the city. So yeah, usually people have to drive out here. I have a pretty decent sized parking lot, but I don't know. It's so weird. It's empty most of the time because it's usually not super busy. But then when it does pick up, it seems to fill up pretty quick because everybody just takes an individual car. Like it's don't generally see like groups of 5-6 people getting out of a car. So on event days, it gets pretty crowded and people have to park across the street. There's also a gigantic parking lot across the street. There's a American Legion that has been there for a long time. They have a big parking lot. It used to be like a grocery store or something. So get a little overflow parking there, but every now and then I come in and there's a few cars parked here for like a house party down the street. So it's fine usually if I don't have anything going on, but if I have an event, it kind of steals some of the spots. Roberto, hello, brother. Greetings from Ixalpa, Mexico. What's up? Greetings from just north in Texas. Actually, I don't know where Ixalpa is, but it's south of here. I know that. I know you did an in-person off-flavor workshop for people like me who live far. I would love to have a virtual workshop. I wouldn't paying shipping. I'm assuming you mean I wouldn't mind paying for shipping of the off-flavor kit. Money well spent. So it's funny you mentioned that. One of the things that I really wanted to do, so that off-flavor tasting was awesome. It's really good to do it in person, but it would also be really beneficial for me to be able to do it live with y'all, which is something I want to do. But the kits are very expensive, so I personally, I mean, you're free if anybody wants to go out and like buy their own sensory off-flavor kit and dose things yourself, and I can just set up a live and do it with you. That would be cool with me. But I initially wanted to basically get some of the kits, spike beers, and then ship beers so that people could do it. But as many of you know, or if you're new to the channel, I can't ship beer in Texas. It is illegal. So I tried reaching out to the TABC, which is the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, to see if there was any way that I could ship just the sample, like the beer that's been spiked, so that it's not necessarily meant for consumption to get, to drink and get drunk. But they would not give me an answer. So that was annoying. But if I can figure out a way to get samples that are already spiked sent to people, I think that would be the best way to have like a $30 kit that I could ship to people. And then we could do a live tasting and everybody could participate and get kind of the overview and have some input from other people about what they're picking up, because anybody can go online and buy one of those off flavor kits, but it's really the most beneficial part is being in a group of people that are all tasting the same thing and having a dialogue about what they're picking up, because I myself have learned so much from just hearing other people's descriptors of off flavors. One that I've used in every one of the trainings is oxidation. There's a flavor in beer when it gets oxidized, it will be it'll present different flavors, and a lot of the common descriptors are like papery, cardboard, things like that, stale. And I always knew those things, and I could taste it in the really concentrated sample. But then this brewer, a friend of mine, said that he got lipstick, like the smell of lipstick, and it just immediately triggered in my mind. I was like, oh yeah, that is absolutely what I smell. So it's really helpful to be able to sit with other people and hear their feedback. So hopefully I can figure out something in the future and be able to get some to you. But that's good to hear. I'm glad that you're at least interested in participating in that, because I think it's really helpful for not just professional brewers, but home brewers as well. Love Texas, but their alcohol laws are wonky. Yes, Alonzo, they are wonky, but I will say this. When I first got in the industry, I was very much like, oh my gosh, these laws, they're so outdated. They're so, whatever. They're antiquated. They're based on a lot of it is religious based laws that were enacted many, many decades ago. But as I've been in the industry longer and hearing stories from other people, you can go on the Brewery 101 or Brewery One-on-One interviews that I do on the channel. Other states have weird laws too. Like when I went to Philadelphia for the Craft Brewers Conference a few years ago, I was shocked that you couldn't just go buy beer at a store. You had to go to a specific distributorship, or you could go to a bar too and buy a six-pack, which was kind of cool. But yeah, every state has kind of weird laws. I'm not sure if anybody has any insight. Let me know in the chat. But what states have the best alcohol laws? What states are the least restrictive? That would be interesting. If anybody is in a state or even another country, what are the laws that are the least restricted? And as far as the shipping beer is concerned, it was on, I think it was on the ballot to be changed last session that Texas could legally ship alcohol, but it got denied. The big issue I have with it is it would be one thing if it was just across the board illegal to ship alcohol, but wineries have been able to ship for, I don't know how long, but for a long time. And it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know. If it's just a blanket thing, even if it's just kind of, I don't know. If it's just like a random law, but it applies to everybody, okay, cool. I get it. I may disagree with it, but at least it's fair in that sense. But when it's like, when there are exceptions, it's like the difference between wine and beer. I don't know. I don't get it. A lot of weird stuff. Laws. How do they get made? All right. Just going to put these in the cooler. Get started on the 13s. Oh man, we're right at 1 hour, which is pretty interesting because I did about 10 6-packs. Granted, I had everything set up already, so that takes about 10 minutes to do. But you know, if anybody's interested in how long it takes me to get everything canned up, usually an hour for 10 6-packs. That's not too bad. I used to be able to, when I was working at the other brewery, I was able to crank out like 4 cases an hour, something like that. So 10 would be, or no, 3 cases an hour. 10's close. I'm going slow today with the live, but I feel like a lot of laws are vestigial prohibition laws that no one has gotten rid of yet. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. But I know I've said it before in another live or on another video, but one of the laws that is just so goofy to me in Texas is like, yeah, you can't sell liquor on Sundays. Okay, whatever. You know, you don't want the priest to go drinking before mass or whatever, but if you have a holiday, so distilleries, liquor stores have to be closed on a few major holidays. One of them is like Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, New Year's Day. But if New Year's Day falls on a Sunday, it then needs to be observed because they're already closed on Sunday. It's then observed on the following Monday, and they have to be closed another day. So it's like things like that are just goofy. Just think about it. Just use your head. But I don't know. Politics is not my thing. Moving on to 13. Still got 11 people in here. I guess I'll keep this rolling while I do 13. I was going to shut it off, but, you know, I'm having a good time. Hope you are too. Let me know if there's any questions. Leave them down there in the chat. I'll try to answer them as best I can. I'm also happy to ramble, listen to myself talk. So why else do you have a YouTube channel, right? You just like listening to yourself talk. Any beer news? I'm so out of it. I haven't looked at anything in like a week, but does anybody have any hot, juicy takes on the beer industry? Anything going on? Any other brewery closures? Any brewery openings that are interesting or cool? Let me know. All right. First 3 done. Breweries around me are closing, unfortunately. Where are you at, Glenn? Sorry, I don't remember if you mentioned that or not. But yeah, they're closing all over the place. But it definitely seems to be more, I guess it just feels like it's more common in larger areas to have more breweries because just statistically speaking, if you have more, there's more of a percentage are going to close, or more number of them will close as a percentage of the total number of breweries. In Raleigh, North Carolina, this area is heavily oversaturated. Oh, okay, Raleigh. I didn't know that. I know about, was it Asheville? Is that North Carolina? Asheville? But yeah, Raleigh, that's interesting. Yes, in my dreams, I thought, laugh out loud. I don't have the business acumen you possess. Well, I'm not sure I've got it either. So we're, we're both in the same boat on that one. Asheville is even more saturated. Yeah, I bet they had such an explosion in like 2015 timeframe, I believe. And then a lot of those like bigger breweries, that was at Sierra Nevada. They're out there on the East Coast as well. Stone, I think, had one, or is it New Belgium? I don't know. A bunch of like satellite production facilities. It is crazy to see how like the beer scenes in different areas, how different they are. I always talk about like Denver. Denver's always been a unique beer place. Obviously, they have the American Great American Beer Festival there every year, so they have like a large influx of beer folks every year. But the brewery scene there was so unique because there were a lot of what I call kind of shotgun breweries, which, you know, I don't know how sustainable it is there. I haven't heard about the closure rate out in Denver, but they had all these little pocket breweries that were in these kind of like 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 square foot shotgun buildings. And their entire business model was just a tap room, and they had food trucks and stuff. But I really like that because everything in Texas is bigger. Like, it's kind of the cliche thing, but back in the early 2010s when craft beer really started booming, a lot of breweries opened up with these gigantic facilities or these big facilities, and then they expanded pretty rapidly. And so you had, you know, this scene that was underdeveloped and underserved, and so there was a huge demand, but then the production just skyrocketed. So all the breweries that opened up were just production focused and had a ton of capacity, sent beer into draft and kegs. And so then the market just got flooded with all this production capacity. And then you're running a production brewery, which has lower margins, and now you're pivoting to this like on-site taproom experience. So I know 10 years, 15 years is a long time, but man, it seems like it changes pretty rapidly. Have you heard of the cyber attack on Duvel Morcott? No, I did not hear about that. What happened? Please explain. There are some interesting concepts in lean manufacturing that might apply to brewing if you are concerned with your production times. It's your DIY mentality and work ethic too. Now, Eric Schlarb, that's the type of name that I don't know if I would trust somebody that would say that. Just kidding. That's my stepdad. He's amazing. Yeah, lean manufacturing. The lean manufacturing, or the most lean manufacturing option that people do it quite often, but well, I don't know what that term means specifically, but the contract brewing, where you go and you basically, somebody else owns all the equipment, manufacturers, and then you have the volume that you can then sell into the market. The problem is that I can't legally do that with my license, so I would have to relicense. But that is one way to kind of get started and not have the huge upfront capital expense, but still makes it challenging. You're still dealing with the market challenges, and the margin's much lower on that as well. This Belgian brewery got attacked by ransomware. They shut down production. Damn. Did not hear about that, but I am familiar with the brewery, or that whole conglomerate. That's crazy. Yeah, cyber attacks are no joke. That'd be weird. I'm going to look into that. I'll report back with findings. All right. Any new trends in beer that y'all see? I haven't seen anything myself in particular, but any like hot brewery releases or anything that's popular right now? Again, I'm not the demographic any longer. I was about 12 years ago, but now I pretty much just stick to drinking my own beers. I understand you're not a fan of Untapped. No, I wouldn't say I'm not a fan of Untapped. I think they're great for getting people exposed to beer, and it kind of gamifies the beer drinking experience. So you get to go out and try a bunch of things, and it's a kind of a nice communal thing. The only downside with Untapped is, well, not the only downside, but one of the downsides with Untapped is that it kind of cultivates this what's the word I'm looking for? This culture of going and trying things, like tasting or sampling or drinking as many beers as possible. And the big downside with that is it really kind of devalues the individual brewery experience. So if somebody is like, my thing is I go to breweries and I try a bunch of beers, that's really cool because you get to go out and a bunch of breweries get this business. And if there's a lot of people doing that, it's good for everybody. But what I've seen is that for a portion of the people that use Untapped that really just want to check in as many beers as possible, like they come in, they get a flight or a couple of beers or samples, they rate them and they leave. And that's the end of the life cycle for that customer. And for, a small business in particular, like a small retail local business, like your bread and butter is repeat customers. Like that's where you're going to that's where your business is either going to thrive or die. And so if you have a large contingent of people that are only coming in one time to try beers and then move on to the next thing, in my opinion, I think that makes it, just slipped. I think that makes it a less sustainable business. But I don't think that that's the fault of Untapped. I think that's just the nature of kind of people want to try new things all the time. But one positive thing about Untapped is that it gives people the ability to, remember a really amazing beer experience or remember that night that they went out with their friends and they had this beer and they can look it up and recall what happened. But yeah, Untapped is kind of weird for brewery owners. I know that a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about it, but it's just the nature of just business and how people interact with things. And if it wasn't Untapped, it'd be like a Facebook beer tracker or something like that. So I think it's fine. It just, ultimately the ratings are kind of weird. And I've seen in most breweries, it kind of just averages out to like 3.75. I feel super fortunate here that I've had really good reviews on Untapped. I've had a lot of really high ratings. Maybe it's because I just specialize in this one particular thing, but yeah, often you'll see with a brewery that's kind of your average brew pub or taproom setting, the ratings will kind of work out to be around 3.7, 3.75, just on the law of averages. Like some people will think it's really great. Some people will think it's less than great. And then that just averages out, and everybody's taste is different. So it's not an authority. Like I would never look at Untapped and be like, oh my gosh, this beer has a 4.0 rating. It's absolutely going to be great. Like your tastes are going to differ. And there's some beers that are rated 3.5 on there that I think are excellent. All right, folks. Well, I am wrapping it up here. I think I'm going to go ahead and get this shut down and cleaned up and get these labeled, get them in the cooler. Yeah, and then open up the business. So thank you for joining the live. I will be on here again. I don't know if I'll do it every week, but I'm going to try to get at least a live in every week or two, canning, or maybe I'll do some other process stuff just to kind of sit on here and chat with you if you want to join. So let me know if you like this. If you're rewatching this, feel free to comment below. Let me know if you have any feedback, any times or days that you think would be better. But appreciate y'all jumping on. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good day.